You should introduce him by what the Freedom Caucus people say about him. Just say
that's
right?
not legal though on the air. That's not legal.
Oh no, we're not governed by those rules.
That's how you
This
should
is a
introduce
podcast,
him.
baby. We can actually swear. We choose not to because we're classy. I'm Arizona Family political editor Dennis Welch.
Dennis, fake news Welch. Try to tell the truth.
And this is the Politics Unplugged podcast.
Dennis, if you have a problem with substance abuse, I am more than willing to talk to you anytime you need.
All right, another eventful week here in Arizona. We had a big, huge, filing today for a ballot initiative seeking to expand access to abortion. There's still some hurdles that's got to clear before it gets to the ballot. So we're still, got some steps there. But I want to start this conversation with President Biden coming to the state. Creating a national monument, nearly 1 million acres up near the Grand Canyon up there. And, we talked a little bit about this on the TV show side. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on this again, Tony. Talk to me a little bit, talk to us a little bit about the politics of this whole thing, because, everything in politics, nothing happens in a vacuum. It's always connected. While, the president said this is good for the environment, it's good policy, there's also a political calculation there, because this block of voters where this is happening, crucial if he wants to win Arizona again, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And it's also political in the sense that this is a thing that we campaigned on. Like, this is a thing that we talked about in the presidential campaign. And so, it's a promise delivered is one thing I would say from the Biden. So it's not like a big surprise. It's something that was out there on the campaign trail. But, I do think it's going to be that's such an important block of voters. Mm-hmm. I think there were times where, I don't remember exactly, but you're getting like 80%. Biden was getting like 80% from up there. And then that margin, even though it's a low turnout area, that really helps you make up deficits in other places.
And real quick, this is the second time in 3 weeks. I forgot to start the show by introducing my guest because I'm very, very new.
It must be because I'm on here.
It's because I'm very new. I was like, why is Chuck pointing to himself? And he's trying to remind me. Like, dude.
Hi, Dennis.
Introduce me.
Hi, Dennis. I'm Chuck Coughlin.
I'm
Chuck Coughlin. This is Tony Cani. It's nice to be here with you, Dennis.
Gentlemen, introduce yourselves. I'm over it.
We've been here before. Indeed, we've been anonymous guests for the first several minutes before as well. But we appreciate you, Dennis.
And I'm like, you don't need to know my name. That's how bad I am at business.
Look, I was in newspapers. I've been in TV for the past 10 years.
Radio.
This is all new. Radio. What the heck is this?
Yeah, it's over the internet. Come on.
All right, we got Chuck Coughlin, the Republican, is over there. Say hi, Chuck.
Former Republican, but yes, you know me.
Yeah, Tony Cani, the Democrat. Say hi, Tony.
Hello again. Hello.
Well, let's get this back on track, okay?
Yes.
We're talking about the president's visit, and the political calculation of him going up to the area near the Grand Canyon. And how crucial that block of voters up there is to him. We know it was a close race last time. He's going to need every vote again.
And remember, on the campaign, one of the big, I did events, like that was part of, I was the deputy director on the Biden campaign, and I handled event stuff. And one of the big debates was we knew we were probably only going to get them one time. We knew it. And so, we were putting together all these ideas, and the very first thing that we did when he and the now vice president were here is we went to the herd and they laid a wreath on the the memorial for Native soldiers, and then he met with all the different tribal leaders, and so this has been a big focus. He's really working with that community, and I think that it's going to pay off.
And Chuck, why is this still a close race? I mean, okay, look, 20 years ago, if you'd have told somebody, it's like, okay, you're going to have a candidate who's going to be multiply indicted candidate on things running, you would think that race would be over, that candidate would drop out. But what we're seeing in the national polls, and I'm assuming it's playing out here in Arizona as well, is that, Trump and Biden are still neck and neck.
Yeah, it's not the race the voters want to see. Let's be clear about that. It's the race that the two national parties are giving us, because both are locked up in this generational feud of having these people be their nominees. And there's no way, given the electoral process, the election process, to break that grip of those two parties on that nominating process. As an incumbent president, despite his age, he's going to have to bow out of that. And I don't see that happening. He's not going to do that. And as the cult-following Republican Party is engaged with, I mean, it's a family thing. He has become a family member of a third to a half of the Republican primary voters. He owns that relationship.
Well, I mean, they bought all those flags.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, what are you going to do? They got those flags.
Well, but they changed the colors on them, too. They're blue and white.
Oh, okay, okay.
Send your emails to
Make a little extra money on the
or
side
your
of the road.
donations, Dennis.
Yes,
or your
yeah,
donations.
yes,
You can send your donations, too. I mean, it's unbelievable. I was thinking about that earlier today. The amount of money he's raising off of that very narrow base of, $10, $20, $30 donations is incredible. I mean, to think about the reach. I think I was reading that he raised $21 million in the several days after the first indictment. I don't think we've seen the numbers after, the second indictment, not the third indictment. We haven't seen the third one.
Remember,
yet.
the fourth is pending in Georgia.
Well, right, and that'll be another fundraising opportunity, I'm sure.
Yeah. What's happened to the field? I guess we're going to have another debate, the first presidential debate for the Republican primary very soon. What has happened to these other candidates? DeSantis was supposed to be the guy. He was the guy. He was the Trump without the baggage, and that hasn't happened, Tony.
I think the story of DeSantis is that candidate quality matters, right? Aside from what he's, can brag to conservative voters that he accomplished, I think that he has had a very awkward introduction to the public at large. And I think that people are like, I don't know if I like this guy. Plus, he's taken all the fire from the Trump people.
Yeah.
And so those two things combined, now people might, people like you who are not the Trumpiest people of the world or at all, must be looking like, okay, well, who's the other person going to be? It's not going to be Trump. And
I'm not giving up on the Iowa caucuses yet. I still think there's an opportunity for one of those candidates to sneak up and bite him there. That retail political level of Iowa caucuses is not his strength. As we've seen, he's not showed up at a bunch of evangelical events. He may not show up.
Are you talking Trump or are you
talking
DeSantis? Okay,
Trump.
Because DeSantis is what we've seen.
He's there everywhere.
He is not good at retail politics.
Right. But Trump is not showing up. Trump today, I think, recently said that he's not going to sign the loyalty pledge. So if he doesn't sign the loyalty pledge, he's probably not going to be on the stage. Chris Christie's going to be on the stage, but he's going to sign it going, there's no way I'm going to endorse that guy, but he's going to sign it anyways. Yeah. So there's some drama going to play out here in that level. But I just think there's an opportunity to upset the apple cart in Iowa given Trump's estrangement. But he's got a 20, nationally he's got this 20-point lead. But I keep reminding people, there are no national campaigns. There's state-by-state campaigns. Yeah. And when you alluded to earlier that they're almost tied, well, that's in a national poll. It's not a state-by-state poll. And so you got to look at this and break it down by state.
It's the best we got right now, Chuck.
It's creating something to talk about, brother.
It's the best thing we got right now. But I think it still shows. I mean, like this former President Trump, he's still got an enormous amount of support with Republicans. And since 2016, people have been asking why. He breaks every norm. Obviously, it's cliche to say that now. He does, starting with, him going after John McCain and his war record.
Well, that's when I walked out. Yeah. I mean, that's when I walked away going, why are you taking a shot at him? That's when I became an independent right after that moment. But what I said, but what the country's done, and this is not just indicative of the right, it's also largely indicative of the left. I mean, we've created icons in our minds, and the Republican Party used to be the party of ideas. That was one of the reasons that I was attracted to the Republican Party originally. And it used to be that party. It is no longer that party. It is not about ideas. It's about loyalty to a cause, very much like the Democratic Party was. I mean, we all remember Ted Kennedy's famous comments. We just can't be a minority party. We can't be the Labor Party. We can't be the Women's Party. We have to be citizens first. And that's now a problem that's consistently plagued the Democrats, and now it has infected the Republican Party.
So, Biden, what's he facing? I mean, there's been a lot of talk. I'm not an ageist. There's been a lot of talk about his age from Democrats even too, talking about maybe he should have stepped down and maybe it was somebody else's time to run. Is this going to be an impediment as he goes down the campaign trail?
I mean, it's a thing that people are going to be thinking about it. They were thinking about it last time too. That's why like the TV ads had him be direct to camera. There were a lot of things that that were done strategically to tell people, hey, you know, people are exaggerating the impact, you know, because so yeah, I think it's going to be a thing that people are thinking about. But I think his biggest issue is going to be that the economic success and the things that he's accomplished with infrastructure and some of the other things, voters aren't really feeling it and they're not giving him credit for it yet. And so that is going to be what the campaign is going to be a lot about. It's like saying, hey, look, we've accomplished these things. You know, we've passed this bipartisan infrastructure. We've done this stuff. The economy is, you know, we created the job, blah, 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 blah. And that's going to be the challenge for him. And I, you know, and so I think if the Republican side is all about 2020 and, you know, and lies about the election, I think that'll start to go through.
Well,
but it's going to be tough.
It's not a majority viewpoint that the election was stolen.
Right,
it's a minority.
And people are
viewpoint.
exhausted with it.
Let me ask you about because you know we tape on Friday. This is just breaking as we're coming into the podcast studio. I don't know all the details, so I apologize. But the Hunter Biden stuff, is that going to be an impediment to the president? And if so, how? I mean, it appears on every level that his son is kind of a screw up. Like, you know, and whatnot. Look, I'm trying to be diplomatic here, Chuck.
Listen, a lot of people have someone in their family who struggled with addiction, of course, but not all of them are the president of the United States.
Yeah.
I just don't think this is going to have the impact on the election that some of the Republican conservatives think that it will. Well, I think it's going to be. I think, you know, and maybe, I just don't think it will. People aren't going to care too much about what a candidate's kid is.
I kind of differ because maybe, Chuck, you can talk to me about and maybe prove me wrong or tell me why I'm wrong. I think that right-wing media has an enormous amount of influence that maybe we're just starting to come to grips with and try to understand. People can live in whatever, you know, media world they want. You know, I see it down at the legislature. You know, Republican lawmakers will quote, you know, certain publications that are known to be, you know, far right-wing stuff. Yep. And I think, you know, they're the ones that drive a lot of the stuff.
They are. You're right. I mean, they're using it as a comparative tool with Trump's prosecution. Yeah. They're making the case, this guy should be prosecuted. He's done worse stuff than the president's ever done. And they're making those allegations to cause people to question the Justice Department, to question the judicial system, to breed contempt for that part of government that, that they all have contempt for. And so, but here's my point on this. I think what happened today with the appointment of a special prosecutor, the argument that the prosecutor was originally making or had surfaced was that there were other U.S. attorneys that were not cooperating with him. This solves that problem. He becomes the king's X in any prosecutorial room, and he doesn't need anybody else's approval. He's the guy. So in a defensive posture of Biden, you would say this is not great news for Hunter. This is really bad news for Hunter. And he could actually say, look, I am not in control of any of this. That is the special prosecutor. I don't have any say-so over what is happening there. And that's true. You remember, this goes back a long way in American history, right? Leon Jaworski, the Watergate stuff, all the prosecutors that were appointed over those periods of times, which were independent of anybody in the Justice Department, to eliminate any types of allegations of cronyism or fraud or favoritism. And so I believe as this plays out, that's going to be good news for the president, really bad news for Hunter, because I think they're going to come down really hard on him.
And the other thing is, like, it's not, you don't see a bunch of Democrats being like, how dare they do this? This is blah, blah. Like, I think
no.
Democrats are kind of like, okay, if something went wrong, let's get to the bottom of it. Right. And so the question on, I think, how it makes a difference is, like, you know, this is a narrow group in the middle that are making up their minds. Well, I don't know how much that's impacting them.
If anybody, right? If anybody. It is mostly, as I said earlier, a defensive tool Republicans have been deploying to this whataboutism.
Yeah.
What about that guy? What about, and that I think was largely taken care of today by this appointment because, like I said, this is not good news for Hunter. So let's move the clock forward now and say the president does get does get convicted of something. Yeah. You can bet your wallet that will happen to Hunter Biden as well.
Well, let's pivot from that.
Yeah, that good news.
On that good news, let's pivot from that. Let's talk a little bit about the abortion initiative, the Arizona Access to Abortion Act. Obviously, we have to explain. The language has been filed. It's got to go through Legislative Council to approve the language, and then they have to start the process of gathering just south of 400,000 valid signatures.
Yeah, I think their goal's half a
million just to be safe, to make sure. And, Chuck, you've run a lot of statewide initiatives.
Yep.
What's the challenge here? It seems like, according to the polling we've seen, that people think access to abortion should be legal in one way, shape, or form. What's the challenge here, though?
Yeah, I think there's clearly uniformity of opinion in the state, probably in the 50, high 50s to low mid 40s, that abortion should be legal and safe for women in Arizona. Mm-hmm. I do acknowledge that the writers of this act pushed the envelope on that. They went very far. They've gone to 20 fetal viability, but what they've also said is they've given windows for a mother's mental health. She can claim mental health. There's a lot of things here that you would say this is pretty an uncontroverted right to abortion, which I think will give an opportunity for the Kathy Herods, the right to life folks to try and make a credible claim. I don't think they'll be successful eventually, and I think they're making this motion. So they got to collect 500,000 signatures. They have to survive signature challenges at which will happen. So the process is the Secretary of State and the county recorders all certify these signatures. They certify if they have enough. Once they certify them, then the legal process starts to challenge those signatures. And then there's an election if they do qualify for the ballot. And then there's legal challenges beyond that, which
there's going to be plenty of those challenges.
It will go on over the vagueness of some of these interpretations that are going to happen. There's going to be, this is going to go on for years, but once you win an election, you have a claim that you have a voter-protected right to access to an abortion in Arizona.
And was that language too broad? Because it does say that it protects access to abortion up to fetal viability, 22, 24 weeks, wherever that is. But afterwards, needs doctor, medical professionals, recommendation if you want an abortion after that. And by the way, it is super rare that you see abortions.
I think
after that,
the people who are in favor of this, I'm one of them, but the people who are running this effort are going to make the case that this gets us back to the way it was before Roe.
Yeah.
And so then the opponent's going to have to explain on the margins why maybe that's not correct or this kind of stuff. And, in this kind of a thing, when you're explaining, I think you're losing. Mm-hmm. And this is a very high intensity issue with voters, but it's also a very high intensity issue with people who don't vote all the time. And if you were to look at the political vote choice of that group of voters, they're going to be leaning heavily Democratic. And I think that especially with younger voters, I saw one thing that the Ohio State precinct in this Ohio election, 90-something% of the students voted, voted no on that issue. And in 2022, Blake Masters only got 20% of voters under the age of 30. That is insane.
Yeah.
That is the amount of votes that Mark Kelly picked up from that age group, even though the turnout was low, the net that he got was higher than Masters got winning seniors.
Wow.
And so this is how the math works. Sometimes people don't think of it. They think you think, turnout's the way you decide the importance of a block of voters. Turnout would be great. We want more turnout. But when 7 out of 10 are voting your way, That makes a huge, huge difference. And I think that we're going to see that play out in this initiative if it makes the ballot, and I think it will.
So what's changed in my lifetime out here and watching statewide elections is that the former electoral coalition to win a statewide election used to be a majority of Republicans, so 50, 60, 55 to 60% of Republicans win unaffiliated voters, maybe win 10 to 15% of Democratic blue dog voters in rural Arizona, maybe in some of those outlying precincts. That's been blown up because of the Kerry Lake Republican or the Donald Trump Republican Party has narrowed its base so far that they're not even getting a plurality or a majority of Republican votes anymore. In a Republican election, you're getting a hardcore base of 35 to 40% of Republicans that support the Lake Trump contingent. They're not winning. They're losing Democrats overwhelmingly, 85 to 90%. And they're consistently losing now the largest block of registered voters in Arizona, unaffiliated voters. They're consistently losing the plurality, the majority of them. So you can't win. I mean, you can't win a race. And abortion is a very clear glass, a microscope to look at that entire election.
There's also evidence from across the country.
Yeah.
You go back last year, you look at the Kansas, and you look at this past week.
Yeah.
The referendum in Ohio, it wasn't abortion directly, but it was abortion. It was an amendment. It was a vote to make it harder.
Yeah.
To enshrine or change the Constitution.
And I think on the side of evidence too, like one of the things that's happened is for years the debate when it comes to abortion rights has been about theoretical things that would happen if Roe went away, right?
Yeah.
And people, and a lot of the pro-life people, are like, that stuff's not going to happen. There aren't going to be these things. And since Roe went away, there are stories that have been in the news in states around the country where people were being forced to, give birth to a child that was not viable, like all these kinds of things. There's health risks, all that. There's stories that are, and I just think that the evidence is
well. And I just interviewed, Kathy Herod, Senator Arizona Policy. She's been involved in passing legislation to make it harder to get an abortion. Obviously, she is opposed to this measure.
She's the poster child of that.
And one of the things supporters of this measure say is like, look, we still have the possibility that old territorial ban could come back online, because you remember that's a near total ban. The only exception is when the life of a mother is in jeopardy. There are no exceptions for rape or incest. Yep. It dates back to pre-statehood. And it's tied up in litigation in a court case right now. The state Supreme Court may or may not hear it. We don't know, but that's the possibility out there.
Yeah.
And what Kathy Herod is saying is like, well, if we need to just change that, the legislature will just go ahead and do that. Is that a message that's going to work? Because I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at the legislature. If you're counting on the legislature, it's kind of like you're Charlie Brown and you're counting on Lucy to hold the football, right?
Lucy in the governor's office is not holding that football.
But
they can't forward things to the ballot. That's the one thing they can do that without the governor's approval. Yeah. They can put other things on the ballot. But this is going to be the offensive play of that ruling coalition that is now governing Arizona politics to see if they can enshrine this in the Constitution. My bet is that they're successful at doing this, and then we'll see what Kathy wants to do then. The Constitution's going to trump a territorial ban. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, no, 100%.
That to bed.
There's statute, and then there's state constitution stuff. You enshrine it. So what could the legislature do next year, this Republican-controlled legislature do next year to thwart this effort?
So, tactically, what they could do is put their own right to abortion on the ballot.
Wow.
That would constitute a 15-week ban. They could do something as a competitive measure to put it on the ballot.
Because they would kind of be it would be in their favor if they create confusion, right? Because if you have competing measures and people get confused, they just vote no on both of them, right?
That's typically the case, but I think when it comes to abortion, people, you don't have to explain the issue to a voter on abortion. They've already made up their mind. And I think a lot of the reason that people vote no is when they're confused. I don't think in this case, I don't think that I think that Yeah.
Well, the real problem there would be getting such a bill or such a move out of the legislature, which might be tactically, politically smart, but which majority of that Republican caucus will be absolutely opposed to, because what they would be saying in voting for that initiative would be to say, I support this level of restriction on abortion. And what a clear majority of them are not. They're with Kathy. They're without any question. They don't want to see any abortion.
And we're running a little bit long, so I want to wrap up the discussion here and just talk a little bit of getting back to presidential politics. How does the abortion initiative play into, the big elections coming up? What is that? Because we've got a big, obviously the presidential race in Arizona, and we've got a huge, massive U.S. Senate race. How does this affect the dynamics? How does it change this?
Let's look at 2022, where during the primary you had Carrie Lake and Blake Masters both make very extreme positions publicly known about abortion. As we got closer to the general, they both tried to kind of walk it back a little bit. And and that became an issue, and they were like, gosh, they were so frustrated they had to keep answering questions about that. With something like this on the ballot, right, like they're going to be asked questions about it no matter what. And so I think it's going to be very hard for them to hide from this issue, and I think that when it comes down to it, it's going to be beneficial for Democrats. And it's not like this is some big play by Democrats to do blah, blah, blah. They're out of touch with the voters of Arizona. And so this is the solution, right? This is the solution. You have to get voters a chance to get legislation or the Constitution to where their views are.
So let's presume this is on the ballot, and it will be the only issue on the ballot that is abortion rights. So it's a major turnout tool for the Biden team, for the Democratic team, for I would argue a majority of unaffiliated voters. It's going to appeal to that constituency, which President Biden needs to show up. As we've acknowledged earlier in the podcast, there's a bit of a lack of enthusiasm around the Biden campaign. But then the other biggest turnout machine for the Democratic Party is Donald J. Trump himself, which is the most powerful turnout machine, which we've witnessed. I mean, there is no greater favor you can do the Democrats than putting Donald Trump on the top of the ticket.
All right, guys. We're going to have to end it right there. And thanks again for stopping by. And, Chuck, next time you stop by, I will introduce you right off the top.
No, just say it's Consultant X. Consultant X is with us today. You know him by his, I can't remember.
They're all the same.
You know him. You love him. It's Consultant X.
You should introduce Chuck by what.
And then on the YouTube, we can just black his face out.
No, I need a shade. I need a shade. We're going to shade him today for fearful of retribution.
Just put him in a silhouette.
You should introduce him by what the Freedom Caucus people say about him. Just say
that's not legal though on the air.
Oh no, we're not governed by those rules.
That's how you
this
should
is a podcast,
him.
baby. We can actually swear. We choose not to because we're classy.
Yeah.
Well, you're classy.
Yeah, they're fine people.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, man.
Well, welcome to welcome back. We're gonna to our producer Coughlin here. We're gonna chat a little bit, get his big thoughts, deep thoughts from this week, and what stood out to you. We talked a little bit about the Biden visit, some of the presidential stuff behind that, with the election and the politics, and the abortion initiative.
The abortion thing is interesting to me just because it's been such a focus for Republicans for years and years and years to try and take out Roe and put in much tougher restrictions on abortion. And through all that time, the polls have shown that's not a majority view.
Yeah.
It's a minority view. So now that it's actually in place, this election is going to be a tough one for a lot of Republicans around the country because
I mean, I think too, like with abortion, I just want to remind anybody who's listening, the abortion question is very nuanced, and when you start asking that question, when you say should abortion be legal in some way, shape, or form, that's different than when you start putting, should abortion be legal, before, up to X amount of time,
right?
And then polls start changing at that point, because it does get a little bit nuanced that way. But that being said, I mean, you look at the mood of the electorate here, maybe across the country. There's a lot of momentum behind this movement. Particularly after what happened last year when they rolled back Roe v. Wade. The Kathy Herods of the world. She's Senator for Arizona Policy. They know they're in for a big fight.
Right.
On this.
It's a huge driver on the left.
Yeah.
And that's...
And the moderates, too, I would
yes.
think. I've talked to plenty of people, Republican types, Republican voters who will tell you it's like, they've had friends or know people who've had to have an abortion. And that's something that's like,
right.
It weighs on your conscience when you're sitting down to vote. Because up until last year, this has always been a theoretical, it's like, moot argument. Like, you would ask politicians where you're at, and on abortion, and if you're on the right, you're saying I want a ban on it, but it was moot because it was protected constitutionally.
Right.
But now that that's off the table, you've really got to make a decision. It's on your ballot. Does that change your view on this?
Yes. And even with some fairly dependable Republican voters, I was talking to an older family member who remembers back 50, 60 years ago, driving with a friend into Mexico because the friend needed to get an abortion. And what a terrifying prospect that was. So even with people who are in their 70s and 80s who are very dependable Republican votes, this is one where that gets shaky for them, and they're not going to see the support they see in a lot of other measures.
All right, man. We went a little bit long, so maybe we'll keep this a little bit short. But one follow-up question for you. It's been a week. Have you come to grips with the fact that your Oregon Ducks are now going to be in the Big Ten?
No.
With my Iowa Hawkeyes?
No. Yeah, no. No, it really hasn't. And the more reporting that comes out, the more it looks like Oregon's really the one that put the dagger in. So that's a nice capper.
Oh.
I did see reporting this morning that said that ESPN offered the Pac-10 or the Pac-12 schools $30 million a school last year, and the Pac-12 came back to them and said, "No, we want $50 million." And ESPN walked away, according to, I believe it's John Canzano, formerly an Oregonian columnist. I think he's a Substack now.
Wow.
And he's generally been right on top of these things. So, bit of a misstep if that was the case, because I believe the next, it got knocked down to 20, which seemed optimistic with Apple, and I think Fox offered him 4.
Well, I just got to say, on that note, I keep asking about this. Clearly, I miss football, college football particularly, especially now that the women's U.S. soccer team is out of the World Cup.
Yes.
And the Diamondbacks appeared to be circling the drain. There's just not much to choose for. There's not much for me in the sport ball world.
No, I'm a big NBA guy. It's completely dead now.
Yeah.
I watched Netherlands and Spain in the Women's World Cup last night. That was my excitement there. Spain with a big late win.
The Dutch are always tough in soccer. I'll leave you with that thought.
Very good. Yes.
All right. Thanks a lot, Colin.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. You can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, the Google Store, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. See you next time.